Okay. And so Mike Gaddy is, he has been so involved. He's been on the front lines of liberty and the promotion of freedom for how many years? I don't even know how many years.
Let's not say. Makes me
Yeah,
old.
I know.
Over 20.
Okay, so more than 30 years probably.
Wow.
And
no self-defense, watch out.
yeah, I know. And so he was in the military for 30 years. He's retired. I believe he was in intelligence. His stance on educating our public officials also, and the county commissioners, attorneys, they were responsible, and he probably single-handedly educated the district attorney of the 22nd Judicial District. They formed a grand jury of which they indicted an undersheriff, and he's going to share with us how a real grand jury is convened and what that looks like. So with that, let me introduce Mike Gaddy, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. If at any time you can't hear me, let me know. Usually most people don't have a problem with that. I hope you will pardon me if I sit down. I spent the better part of 30 years jumping out of perfectly good airplanes. Took a toll on my knees, and at least they still function to some extent. Let me also tell you that, and don't throw anything at me, but during my military career, I spent 3 years at what we at that time called the No Such Agency, called NSA. I was not involved in signal or electronic intelligence. My field of endeavor was human intelligence. So I didn't tap your phone.
Well, a lot of others
But I can tell you all of the things that were revealed by Snowden has been going on for 30 years, people. There's nothing new there. That is not a new thing at all. They were doing it when I was at the agency in the late 70s. So it's not new. The technology's new, and it's more advanced. But I can remember sitting at panels and watching the people working inside at Fort George Meade, Maryland, and when certain words would come up in a telephone conversation, a panel would light up, they would push a button and listen to the rest of that conversation. Without a warrant, without anything, so it's been going on for a long time, and we had no worries at that time about Muslim terrorists. So it's been going on. The people of this country represent the greatest threat to the government. And 85% of their intelligence resources are aimed at us, not foreign countries. Let me also tell you that one of the things I've found out in my decades of doing this is I end up making a lot of people angry. So if you leave here angry today, I've done my job correctly. What I will tell you is on this side of the board is a U.S. Constitution with the first 10 amendments to it. How many of you have one of these?
You're with me.
Mine says what it means. What they put in here, what it means is incorrect. Do you know why it was put there?
To protect our
If
life, liberty, and property.
But how in each one goes to that. If you are carrying this and you don't know why it was written, you're carrying a concealed weapon with no ammo.
It was designed to form a government.
That's true, but we already had a government.
To protect us against a tyrannical government.
Well, actually, the thing that's really going to be strange is the fact that the 1787 Constitutional Convention was unauthorized.
Really?
13th article of the Articles of Confederation said that the only way that you could ever get together to have such a convention was with the participation of all 13 colonies. Did not happen. How many of you have heard of the Annapolis Convention? The Annapolis Convention was held in September of 1786, And the Annapolis Convention was held at Annapolis, believe it or not, and only 5 states showed up. The state of Maryland didn't even send representatives to the Annapolis Convention. There were people who wanted to change the Articles of Confederation. They wanted to change them for a reason, because the only way you could get a bill passed under the Articles of Confederation is all 13 states had to agree to it. Imagine how many laws the government would get passed today if every state had to agree to it.
Wasn't it years that the Constitution took to get signed?
Oh, yes.
It got transferred and passed and was in this state for this many months and this over here and taken over there.
One of the advantages I had, and I got this advantage by making a 3-star general very angry. Towards the end of my career, I was at the Pentagon. And I had a job which was basically to tell lies to the families of American servicemen who were missing in action from Vietnam. And I refused to tell a family member a lie about what had happened to a member of their family. And so this 3-star general, the commander of TRADOC, said, "Well, Sergeant Major, we've got to find a place for you." And I said, "Good, I didn't want to be here to start with." There's a reason they call this place the place with 4 walls and a spare, or the Puzzle Palace. Because very few people in here have a clue what they're doing. So he came in one day, I'd finally been a thorn in his side long enough, and he sent his aide, a colonel, into my office. He said, "How long will it take you to get your stuff packed and get out of here?" I said, "About 3 hours." He said, "Well, actually, you've got the rest of the week." I said, "Don't need it. I'll be out of here in 3 hours." Got all my stuff ready, took it to my pickup truck, and they told me that I had been assigned as the senior Army ROTC instructor at the University of Virginia.
Ooh.
So short drive over to Charlottesville. Anyone know who founded University of Virginia?
Was it Jefferson?
A fellow by the name of Thomas Jefferson. And when I arrived, I went in and reported to the dean, and he said, "Who pays for you?" And I said, "The Army." He looked at my personnel file and he said, "You're an enlisted man, you have 2 masters. Why are you still an enlisted man?" I said, "Because I didn't want to be an officer." So he said, "Okay," he said, "I'm going to take advantage of your education, and you're going to be teaching evening classes on the Constitution and military history and U.S. history. In the daytime, you'll teach your classes on military science." And I said, "Well, please don't throw me in the briar patch." So then, by so doing, I had access to not the original documents, but I had access to over 3,000 letters written by Thomas Jefferson during his lifetime. I had access to all of his personal works. If you go to Monticello, I had access to his library, although it was on, at that time, microfiche. Now it's on a different medium. You can just download the CD and read the stuff, but back then it was a microfiche. I got the most profound education of my life while I was there teaching. And it was absolutely fantastic. I learned to understand what happened. I learned to understand why we had a Constitution. I learned to read this correspondence, and it gave me a great insight. But one of the things that happens is most of what I learned, no one was taught in school. And there's a reason for that as well. There were a faction of our founders who were not necessarily really good folks. They wanted a government that would give them more power. They called it energy. We want a government of more energy, was the constant theme. 3 of those people were the 3 people who are the authors of the Federalist Papers: Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay. They wanted a government with more power. As a matter of fact, John Jay, in a letter to George Washington, said, we need the ability to coerce the people. We need a government that will allow us to coerce the people.
John Jay said that?
Yes. He was the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. So then, all of these delegates were sent to Philadelphia to amend the Articles of Confederation. No one was sent there to create a new constitution. Ironically, James Madison already had a new constitution ready, which he called the Virginia Plan. He sent it to Washington, he sent it to John Jay, and he sent it to Alexander Hamilton in April of 1787, before the convention even started. So these people knew that there was going to be a radical change in the form of government from the Articles of Confederation. And we ended up with 55 delegates in Philadelphia in May of 1787. And no one from Rhode Island showed up. Who also didn't attend in 1787? Probably what the other founders said was the most devout Christian in the colonies.
George Washington?
Man who was called the voice of thunder, Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry refused to attend the 1787 convention because he said, "I smell a rat." So he did not attend. So these delegates got together. They got inside the convention hall and they put a guard at the door so no public citizen could come in and see what they were doing. They met on the second floor so no one could look through the windows. They pulled the shades so that no one can see through. The Virginia Plan was a plan for a nationalist form of government. Imagine that. A nationalist form of government. When you say your pledge and you say one nation, you're contrary to what the founders believed, what our true founders believed. When you say indivisible, you're contrary to what our founders believed. The Pledge of Allegiance was written by a socialist by the name of Francis Bellamy. He was kicked out of he was a defrocked minister because he taught from the pulpit Jesus was a socialist. And he was a very big fan of nationalist government. In the 1920s, he introduced the Pledge of Allegiance into our school system. The children in American schools in 1920 said the Pledge of Allegiance while doing this.
It was palm upward.
Yeah. Or maybe they were just waving to the crowd. I myself composed a Pledge of Allegiance to the Bill of Rights. Be happy to send it to anybody who would like to see it. That's the only pledge I do. I stand reverently while other people are doing it, but I'm not saying those words because they go contrary to what our founders intended. I've got a lot of people back home that don't speak to me because I won't do the pledge. I've got a preacher in Bayfield who won't speak to me because I won't do the Pledge of Allegiance. Under God was not added until 1952. It was added by President Eisenhower. So here we have Madison, who was known as a little bit shriveled apple of a man who was about 5'6". He was the Bill Clinton of his era because he could come down on three sides of the same issue in 15 minutes. But he had a nationalist form of government all prepared. The nationalist form of government he wanted would have eliminated all the states. What is a nationalist form of government? The big difference between a nationalist form of government and a republic. In a nationalist form of government, the government operates straight on the people. In a republic, the federal government only acts on the states. If we had a true republic, the federal government couldn't arrest anybody in this country. They wouldn't be controlling our lands either, because they have no authority to do so. But Madison realized that he had a little squeaky voice. You know, if you want a real caricature of James Madison, just imagine Barney Fife with longer hair. And he knew that he couldn't present this Virginia plan with the authority that he needed, so he asked John Randolph to do it, who was the governor of Virginia. John Randolph was 6'4", had a booming voice, very handsome man. His wife, Thomas Jefferson's first wife, was a Randolph, so they were cousins or in-laws. So Randolph gave the Virginia plan. Now, why do we need to know this? Why do we need to know these people did this? The reason we need to know that they tried to do this, and I had